A new kind of life, eukaryotes. In the last chapter, we learned about the simplest forms of life, prokaryotes. And we learned there are two types of prokaryotes, archaea and bacteria. Originally, archaea and bacteria were thought to be about the same, but that turned out to not be true. They are very different from one another, including in their DNA sequences and how they live. Together, they represent two of the three domains of life, archaea and bacteria. The third domain of life is the one we are more familiar with, because this domain includes all the living things that we can see. The third domain is eukarya, the subject of this chapter. Here are the three domains of life. They all originated from a common ancestor, and we have bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Now here are three different terms. Eukarya is a domain of life. Eukaryotic is a complex type of cell, and a eukaryote is an organism belonging to eukarya and made of eukaryotic cells. Even the simplest bacterial cells are amazingly intricate and complex. However, eukaryotic cells can be much larger and many times more complex than prokaryotes. The development of eukaryotes was one of the most significant events in the history of life. Eukaryotic cells are like a body. Our bodies have organs, and eukaryotic cells have their own organs known as organelles. Eukaryotic cells can live as single-celled organisms, and they also make up all multicellular organisms. As we learned in the last chapter, all cells, whether prokaryotic or eukaryotic, have four structures in common. They are surrounded by a cell membrane. They contain a semi-fluid or jelly-like substance called the cytoplasm. They contain chromosomes, which carry the cell's genes, their unique sequence of DNA, and they have ribosomes, which assemble amino acids into proteins. Here are the common cell features between prokaryotes and eukaryotes: the cell membrane, DNA, ribosomes, and cytoplasm. Here are the important differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are usually larger than prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells have small compartments inside them called organelles. Eukaryotic cells have a membrane-bound nucleus that houses DNA. Prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. Their DNA is carried on a small, circular chromosome in the cytoplasm. Eukaryotic cells can be specialized building blocks of multicellular organisms. A eukaryotic cell can be 10 to 100 times larger than a prokaryote. The nucleus and the mitochondria are examples of organelles. Other organelles are present in the animal cell. The mitochondria in the cell are about the same size as the bacterium shown. Life began 4 billion years ago. For the first 2 billion years, there were only prokaryotes. The first eukaryotic cells were a major breakthrough about 2 billion years ago. After that, the life forms that you're more familiar with evolved. Plant life appeared about 1 billion years ago. The earliest animal life appeared about 660 million years ago. There are many types of life in domain eukarya. Eukaryotic life forms are classified into 4 kingdoms. The first, simplest eukaryotes are classified in kingdom Protista. They were single-celled, and some of them may have looked like the greatly magnified picture of this organism. The organisms in the plants, fungi, and animal kingdoms evolved next. Fungi include mushrooms, molds, and mildew. Plants vary in type, from ancient, simpler mosses to modern, complex flowering plants. Animals range from ancient sponges and hydra to modern insects, birds, fish, and mammals. Here is a sponge, a simple animal. All multicellular organisms are eukaryotes. The tree, cat, and mushroom are all eukaryotes. They consist of eukaryotic cells that are smaller than 1 cubic millimeter, the size of a grain of salt. But why are eukaryotes multicellular? One of the main reasons as to why multicellular life evolved is that there is a limit as to how large a cell can be. If an organism needed to be larger, it could only accomplish so by making more cells, rather than increasing the size of its one cell. Cell size is limited by a cell's surface area to volume ratio. At the time when prokaryotic cells were evolving, there were most likely different sizes of cells. A cell's efficiency and ability to survive depended on its surface area to volume ratio. The cube to the right is modeling a cell. As the edge of the cube increases, both the surface area and volume increase. However, the volume increases faster than the surface area. As a result, the surface area to volume ratio decreases as the cell grows larger. The volume of the cell determines the amount of chemical activity it can carry out per unit time. The surface area of the cell determines the amount of substances the cell can take in from the environment and the amount of waste it can release. As a cell grows in size, its surface area to volume ratio decreases. It performs chemical reactions faster, but it has a harder time getting nutrients in and waste out. Thus, it is not favorable for a cell to grow without limit. Since eukaryotic cells are larger than prokaryotic cells, how do they get around the efficiency problem? Though they are the fundamental unit of life, eukaryotic cells are composed of many smaller parts, organelles. Like the organs in your body, each organelle carries out a specific required function, such as transporting waste to the cell membrane and out of the cell, transforming energy in food, glucose, into energy cell functions, maintaining the cell structure, and making large biomolecules. Specialization of organelles in eukaryotic cells allowed them to become much larger and more efficient than their prokaryotic precursors. Organelles are built out of molecules that are built from atoms. Organelles work together to carry out all the functions of cellular life. Here are the eukaryotic organelles: nucleus, mitochondria, vacuoles, cell wall, Golgi apparatus, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, rough endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, lysosomes, and chloroplasts.